Dr. Willie Parker, welcome to the show. We're
My pleasure.
yeah, we're so happy to have you. And I told you we were going to start with a little icebreaker exercise. This is something that I've picked up recently. It's a deck of interview cards. So I've divided them into three piles. I do not know what's on these cards. I'm going to ask you to choose a number between 1 and 3, and then I'll pick the top card, and that'll be your question.
Okay. 3.
3.
People love 3.
People love 3. So, Dr. Willie Parker, what is the most annoying bill you have to pay?
Ooh, the most annoying bill that I have to pay is the cable bill.
The cable
Uh,
bill?
yeah, I feel like the cable bill is the gateway to the rest of the world for me with internet access. And why I feel like commodifying our access to the outer world seems to me like an injustice because I can pay my cable bill, but many people can't.
Mm,
So I resent having to pay for something that everybody should have access to.
yes. I agree. Do you know if there are countries where that type of access is free?
I know that there are people who are trying to democratize access, like the Gates Foundation, by
Yeah.
coming up with Wi-Fi accessible equipment and trying to create access to the internet. I think part of the whole expansion of Facebook in terms of having billions of people having Facebook accounts is predicated upon them having internet access. So you wouldn't
Right.
create billions of Facebook accounts if you weren't counting on people having internet access.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
creating access, but every time we create a point of access to democratize opportunity, it seems like somebody commodifies it and it kind of is counterproductive.
Yeah. Isn't
We're
that the
doing the same
truth?
with reproductive health and healthcare. That
Yes.
should be something we should be access to, and yet you're not entitled to the healthcare you should have. You're only entitled to the best healthcare you can pay for. Same with internet access.
Yep. In this country. Um, and that is true words. Thank you so much for that. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins. This is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So, like I said, we are talking to Dr. Willie J. Parker today. He is an OB/GYN specializing in abortions and a reproductive justice advocate. He is a graduate of Berea College in Kentucky and holds degrees from the University of Iowa, College of Medicine, the Harvard School of Public Health, the University of Cincinnati, and the University of Michigan. It's a lot of schools. You've gone to a lot of schools. He's board certified in obstetrics and gynecology, trained in preventative medicine and epidemiology through the Centers for Disease Control. Dr. Parker currently provides abortion care. So this is in your bio. So we're going to talk about that, right? For
Yeah.
women in Alabama, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Illinois, and is the former medical director of Planned Parenthood Metropolitan Washington, D.C.
That's
Um,
a stale bio,
it's a
Laura.
stale bio. So
Uh-oh.
tell me what's different.
Let me give you what's
Yeah.
different is so I went to all of those schools and have all that education, and Starbucks still charges me the same for my coffee that they charge you. But I my right now the essential practice that I have is in uh, or was in Arkansas. We'll talk about that. I'm the medical director of the only abortion clinic in Arkansas where women could get procedural abortions. And I also work in Nevada and Washington State.
Oh, wow.
Um, I've been proud to have been in all of the places you cited, but in my older age, I've kind of pared down my travel
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm working primarily in Arkansas, but also in Washington State and
Okay.
Nevada.
Yeah. And do you work in Alabama as well?
I'm still licensed in Alabama, but I am no longer the medical director for the one clinic that's still actually providing care there. So I'm still licensed in Alabama, but I haven't
Right.
practiced there in almost a year.
Okay. So when I think of abortion clinic, I think bulletproof glass. I think waiting rooms full of women of all races. I think about protesters chanting outside with pictures of bloody babies and baby parts on signposts, screaming violently at everyone who enters or exits. I think of doctors. I think of mainly white female doctors. That's what I think of. I don't particularly think of male doctors when I think abortion clinics. I do not think of black ones. And I definitely don't think of black male doctors who identify as Christians. And so I just wanted to, your incredible book, thank you so much for sending it to me. It's called Life's Work. You talk about being raised in churches where girls who accidentally became pregnant were publicly shamed or expelled from the church ministry. And you say, in the book, I remain a follower of Jesus, and I believe as an abortion provider, I am doing God's work. You also say, what I do is unfathomable to my faithful opponents, yet preserving access is my calling. As a Christian and as a doctor, I am committed to protecting women's health. So one of my first questions to you when we talked over the weekend was I wanted to hear more about what that was like for you. I read about it in your book, and we'll talk more about your book later, but can you explain it for our listeners what that was like for you, the conflict and then your choice to provide care for these women?
Well, thank you for uh, the tee up. I think I've been trying to figure out the most succinct and the easiest way to state why I chose to be a person of conscience. And I say that somebody once said that when you wrestle with your conscience and you lose, you actually win. And for me, the matter of what my appropriate role was as a human being, as a person whose faith identity is Christian, and as someone who chose medicine as my craft and my chosen profession, uh, I had to resolve the uh, surface inconsistencies that people tried to create for me as I claimed each of those identities. So, for example, as a healer and a medical practitioner, my ethical and moral obligation was to provide health care and healing and safety for my patients.
Mhm.
As a Christian, my values are supposed to be do unto others as you want them to do unto you, and you should always help people in need. But in my Christian identity, there are people whose Christian understanding said that I had to exclude certain people, namely uh, people who were carrying a fetus. So if you, on the surface, start to try and integrate those things, there's a dissonance or a disconnect. And for me, it took me 12 years to resolve that by doing a deeper values clarification of really deciding what my role is as a healthcare provider, and what does my faith identity as a Christian allow me to do in that role.
Mm.
And so I wrestled with that for years, referring women on from when I wasn't able to provide because I hadn't become clear about whether or not it was moral for me to provide the service. I never questioned a woman's right to make the decision, but I had to reconcile what my role was, and that all kind of crystallized for me while I was listening to a sermon by Dr. Martin Luther King, where he took the story of the Good Samaritan, and he did that many times, but in this particular case, he did it in the midst of his sermon on the last night before his life, on April 3rd in Memphis. He explained to the audience what made the Good Samaritan good. And in substance, he gives the narrative of the person who stops to help a fallen traveler who's from that community, the person who stops a Samaritan or an outsider to the community. Uh, Everybody from the community was afraid what would happen to them if they stopped to help.
Mm.
Dr. King said that what made the Good Samaritan good was that he reversed the question of concern. And instead of asking what will happen uh, to me if I stop to help, he asked what will happen to this person if I don't stop to help him. And in that
Mm.
moment, in the way most of us with a sacred text or a story that appeals to us, we read ourselves into the story. I read myself into that story as the person with the ability to help or the person who has to make the choice about whether or not to help.
Yeah.
So I was the Samaritan in the story, and the women and pregnant people that I found myself compelled to take care of were the wounded and injured traveler. And so, in some other ways, even as I share this with you, I think about I'm the outsider as a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
In,
Mm-hmm.
in this woman's world, it's the narrative of in this space of abortion where women are and pregnant people are the only people who have a uterus and can carry. People would think I should be indifferent or would be indifferent because I don't have a uterus and would never have an unintended pregnancy. But I saw my moral obligation as a human being and my Christian calling as one to give compassion as that I was morally obligated to provide this care. And whereas many people have to become comfortable providing abortion, I became uncomfortable not providing them when I know what it meant to women.
Mm. Wow. Wow. I love that story. And you tell it so beautifully. I I don't I don't recall the Good Samaritan story by Dr. King in the way that you told it, but it it fits perfectly and it really explains why someone of faith who was in this position who had no moral judgment of it, but decided that this was not something that you were going to do, why you might make that decision then to start providing that type of care. Because like you said, you are the bystander. And the message was, you're to not worry about how you might be seen, right? But to provide the care that's needed anyway.
Sure, sure.
Um, so I just want to tell the people that are listening, at the time of this recording, there are going to be certain things that have happened. By the time you hear this a week later, things might have changed. So Dr. Parker and I are going to talk about things as they are today, which is what is today? Tuesday,
Tuesday the 28th.
Tuesday, June 28th. Thank you. So as of Tuesday, June 28th, Roe versus Wade was overturned on Friday of last week. The decision came down on Friday. Um, I want to talk a lot about that, but I want to just talk for you to talk to me or explain to me what the process was for getting abortions in the states where you provide care prior to Roe versus Wade being overturned. What did it look like? Could women just come in and get the procedure? Did they have to wait? Like, what did it look like?
Well, I'll do that, but in this moment, if I can be fully present, uh, in this moment today, I was supposed to be in Little Rock, Arkansas, providing an abortion for a woman who's 20 weeks pregnant,
Yes.
who saw me a week ago today. And because in Little Rock, and this will be part and parcel to what you're asking me,
Yes.
the woman who came to see me in Little Rock last Tuesday. In in Arkansas, the law requires a woman to have a face-to-face counseling session with a doctor, and then that initiates a 72-hour waiting period
Mm.
before she can have an abortion because someone has decided that a woman can't think enough about the decision that she's making, as if she's not clear about what her decision is about this pregnancy before she sought my care. And so this young woman, by the time I saw her, was 19 weeks pregnant. She had spent a month waiting to get her appointment in in Arkansas because she's from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And she had spent a month because we already had a backlog of a month's wait to get an initial appointment because of what happened starting in Texas back in last September. So when she made the appointment, when she called for an appointment, I would presume she was 15 weeks. She had to wait a month. The day that I saw her, she was 19 weeks. Because of the waiting period, I was going to be there today. And so I would have been able to do her procedure. So on Friday, after making the investment of traveling 5 hours for an initial appointment, paying the fees, and then having to wait 72 hours, even if someone tried to do a procedure on Friday, she would have been ineligible because she had to wait 72 hours and the clinic closed on Friday. So you ask, what has been the experience of getting abortions for women um, at this stage? At least for this woman, she had a chance to ask to seek an abortion. But
Mm.
pre 1973, there was no chance to get an abortion because abortion was illegal. And so women who had unplanned pregnancies, but no legal access, stratified into two groups. Uh, in places where they had health care access, like in New York, women could go to their doctor, and their doctor would coach them on what to say to a medical ethics board at the hospital,
Mm.
which would hear that woman's story and would decide if she said she had mental health issues and all of that. They would then grant her permission to have an in hospital illegal abortion, but safe abortion, because they had made a medical justification for her abortion. Meanwhile, poor women and black and brown women, two groups that are often synonymous but not always the same, had no recourse but to take their chances with a clandestine abortion provider and have someone either insert at that time a clothes hanger or a sharp object, or give them
Mm.
some sort of medication to cause them to miscarry, or do some traumatic event to them. And
Mhm.
because of that, women who didn't have access to legal safe abortions often had the consequences of a safe abortion. And what that looked like was, if they didn't bleed to death or die from overwhelming infection, they would recover from serious injuries only to become infertile. And even if their lives changed and they wanted to have children later, their infertility was caused by the unsafe abortion that they had, which might have saved their lives literally, but took their lives from them in many other ways.
Mm. 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 Um, that is quite the picture. It's a picture I've heard painted for me millions, not millions, but hundreds of times. Um, I remember my mother and her friends sitting around our kitchen table when I was like 5 or 6, talking about this subject and where one could go to get an abortion. And one of them must have been pregnant. I don't know which one it was. But I remember sitting there and hearing that word and just feeling the tension in the air around this, because this was not this was going to have to be someone was going to have to leave the country or leave the state in order to get this. And then my mother explained to me, probably in the with the best words she could at that point, what they were talking about. But um thank you for that. And I just want to kind of get this part out of the way, because it was on my mind. I asked you, and I want to hear what you think about, or I want our listeners to hear. The National Abortion Federation site lists an increase in death threats and threats of harm, from 92 death threats and threats of harm to in 2019 to 200 in 2020, and then it went up in 2021 and 22. They cite a 125% increase in assaults outside of clinics in 2021. 125% increase. I think I said that. And you write that your 5 brothers and sisters worry for your life, and yet you don't wear a vest to work. When I asked you about death threats, you said that you were more fearful of being stopped by the police. And I just wondered if you could explain why you don't wear a vest and why you're not afraid to perform your work. Or I don't know if you are afraid, but you're not afraid. It doesn't
Mhm.
stop you.
Sure. Um, I the my kind of tongue in cheek and kind of creating perspective on the risk and threat of death for me as a black man. Uh, the most perilous thing that most people can identify, given the almost explosion of black people, I'll call it extrajudicial executions of black people. No matter what your offense is, you should be tried to court, but people are shot down in the street, often unarmed and what have you. So, uh, in terms of thinking about real risks and theoretical ones, the risk of being killed by the police for whatever reason has been more real to me as a black man
Mm.
than the theoretical risk that someone extreme on the issue of abortion might try and assassinate me. In both cases, I'm scared, because you can't be brave unless you're scared.
Right.
I jokingly said to you that the gazelle who loses his fear of a lion becomes lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't underestimate or disregard the extreme positions that some people hold on abortion, uh, and that it could put me in the crosshairs. And if you mix up a concoction of racism and anti-abortion fanaticism, and they take a sip of that day, that could be my number
Yeah.
So I've never been unclear about that. But I also have understood that if I entertained hypothetical risks more than I did real ones, I would lose my nerve to do what I feel called to do.
Mm.
So am I have do I am I do I have fear? There have been times where I've walked and I had to just put one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
But what I chose to focus on is what is the importance of what I do? What am I called to do? What am I going to be accountable for in the end of my life? Dr. King said you might want to live a long life, but the ultimate question you're going to be asked, if someone's going to ask a question of you at the end of your life, is going to be, what did you do for others?
Mm.
And I feel I've been uniquely positioned as someone trained in clinical medicine and reproductive health, um, and has the ability and the willingness to help women. And so those things have held my attention, and not the risk. If I thought wearing a vest would make me safer, I would wear one. But Dr. George Tiller, who I had the privilege of meeting,
Mm.
said once, not necessarily to me, but in one of his communications, he said, it was a reality check for me. He said, if somebody really wants to harm you, all they have to do is make a plan and not tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
um, the incessant psychoterrorism that I call people who parade in front of clinics and take your picture and call out your name to make you feel vulnerable and exposed. Um, I made my peace with that.
Mm.
Uh, uh, I I feel like I had to develop the the focus of understanding that I could live with the idea that somebody might hurt me for trying to do what I know is right. I don't know if I had enough courage to live with the cowardice of being unable to do what I know is right simply because I was afraid that someone might hurt me, if that
Wow.
makes any sense at
Wow.
all.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's just very unusual. Um, I don't, I mean, like I said, I don't know anybody who does what you do. No one who does what you do. And so I would imagine that it takes a lot of courage just to do that under the best of circumstances. And like I write about race a lot. And when my articles get published, I have, columns of people who hate me. And Scott looks at them. I don't anymore. It's very personal. They are attacks on my character and my writing, but they are not in person. I don't see these people, and you're walking by them and having these epithets and like things hurled at you as you walk. That's just, I mean, I just want to thank you for doing what you were called to do in spite of that.
And I'm going to keep my answer short because I know you want to get to a lot of things, and I want to answer. I want to talk to you about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of the when the threats for me are real, and the sometimes my 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 male bravado kicks in, and I want to confront people. But what I try to right size my sense of outrage about being attacked and accosted in that way, I compare it to what it must take for a woman who, in or a pregnant person who has made the decision to end their
Mm,
pregnancy, to seek the care.
yeah.
Them having to walk by people who are shaming them and making them think that they're acting outside of the context of their faith identity.
Yeah.
I decided that if they can muster the courage to go through all of that, I
You
just want to
can.
make sure that there's somebody there to meet them and to let them know that not everybody's indifferent to their need.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, in male bravado talk, I just man up to the level of courage that I know women have to muster to come and meet me. So
Yes. Yes. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. People are blaming the 2010 midterms. They're blaming the fact that Ruth Bader Ginsburg refused to retire when Obama could have filled her seat if she had. People are blaming Donald Trump, which feels like the frog blaming the scorpion to me. People are blaming Joe Biden. Um, you called what happened on Friday, June 24th, just a few days ago, the ultimate bystander crime. Tell me who's to blame here and what you think about, or what are you angry about? Yeah, tell me.
Well, we've seen the enemy, and it is us. It's really easy. Donald Trump didn't create the sentiments of angry white men or people who feel entitled to the American dream that feel that they're being left out. He didn't create that. He merely gave body and presence to an ideology.
Mm.
Uh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg obeyed her conscience, and yeah, we can always say if wishes were fishes,
Right.
the world would be an ocean.
Mm.
So yeah, it'd be really easy to say this is all your fault, but no, we've made the choices for who we allow to lead, how we choose our leaders. We have turned democracy or politics into a politics can be a spectator sport, but the democracy cannot. And so democracy is participatory. And so we have inherited or we have acquired the type of leadership and the political structure and the devolution of a democracy or a democratic experiment. We have inherited what we've allowed to occur. And we've allowed the pendulum to swing to the place where uh, uh, instead of it demanding truth, we allow alternative facts.
Mm.
Uh, and all of the things, it's been a perfect storm. We've allowed our misogyny and our patriarchy to overlook the most qualified candidate ever, which is a woman. Uh, and even if you want to racialize it, it was a white woman. So we are sitting in the poop that we created,
Mm.
and it's easy to blame, and that's a kid move. And so, in some ways, as a society and as a nation, we need to grow up politically.
Yes.
We need to rediscover the ability to manage nuance and complexity and
Mm-hmm.
not allow things to be distilled down to the point of stupidity and move and act on those kinds of things. So, yeah, I wish uh, uh, Justice Ginsburg had stepped down. I
Mm-hmm.
wish President Obama might have had more fight and fought harder for Merrick Garland and fought
Mm.
back against. But we have what we have, and it's there's no need to put this in the retrospective scope. We are here,
Right.
and so the question is, what now? But
Retrospective stuff. I like that.
yeah,
Yes.
I just think it's wasted energy to kind of keep redoing the 2016 election,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more comfortable than now understanding that your next political move is in November,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Indeed it is. And boy, I intend to do everything I can to rally my comrades, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the call is November. The call is November. Actually, the call isn't November. The call is now to get ready to fund, to inform, to get the word out. But it will take place in November.
I hope
President,
there were a lot
yeah,
of voter registrations going on at all these marches where everybody was
yes,
launching the big F bomb. I mean, I consider the marches a collective F bomb to the Supreme Court.
yes,
But I hope that while people were shaking their fists and raising their middle fingers, that with their other hand they were signing voter registrations.
yes. I hope so too. I don't think they were, but I hope they start to incorporate that. Um, President Biden is now talking about providing people being able to provide care on federal lands in the states where abortion is banned. He's talking about loosening the restrictions on the so called abortion pill. He has expressed a commitment in guaranteeing women's rights to cross state lines to access abortion services. So I want you to tell me a couple of things. I want to know what else, in your opinion, should be being done right now, or what he should be doing. And then I also want you to tell me about telemedicine abortions, because I didn't know what how that worked until you told me on Saturday. So you can start with whichever one you want.
Sure. Well, I don't know. I think all those things are good. I think that President Biden should be asking the same questions that Martin Luther King encouraged us to ask. Politics asks, is it popular? Vanity asks, is it popular? Politics asks, is it practical? And he does his other litany, but he says at the end of the day, the conscience asks, is it right? He said there are things
Mm.
that are neither politic nor popular nor expedient, but there are things that need to be done simply because your conscience tells you those are the right things to do.
Yeah.
So I would ask the president to put in his checklist, what is the right thing to do in this moment?
Mm.
Not test the winds and see how it's going to play with polling, but what is the right thing to do? My disenchantment with polling is polls tell us over 70% of Americans agree with having abortion legal and available in some form or fashion. The
Yes.
reality is, if that was really true, people don't vote that way because we'd have different policies if people voted the way they poll.
Mm-hmm.
But so I don't know. There's there are a whole bunch of there's a checklist of things to do. Do anything and everything that needs to be done in this moment. And there are people who are far smarter than I am who can figure out what those specifics are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, so that's that. In terms of telemedicine abortion,
Yeah.
um, the technology uh, yields many benefits. You know, we figure out how to do things long before we figure out whether or not to do them or what to do with them.
Right.
And through the technology of telemedicine, overcoming the barriers that many people are isolated uh, in abortion care, we know that 88% of women live in a county with no abortion provider, and many women have to drive many miles to get to an abortion provider just to get access.
Mm-hmm.
Telemedicine allows us to provide services in rural areas, specifically services that don't require a procedural aspect or technical skill. Uh, and so telemedicine capitalizes on the fact that most abortions right now most abortions happen in the first 12 weeks, and 88% of our abortions happen in the first 12 weeks. Now, with the advent of medication abortion with a medical regimen that is effective 92 to 92 to 98% of the time,
Mm.
all someone needs to be able to do is to diagnose a pregnancy, make sure it's in a safe place, like inside the uterus and not in the tube, make sure that a person doesn't have any other underlying health contraindications, and then you could easily and make sure that the person is certain about their decision and has weighed all of their options. And then if they conclude that they want to proceed, you can give them the pill. That can be done remotely by having the medicine on site and then having them have a face-to-face encounter like we're having as we talk,
Mm-hmm.
we take this segment, and then having some means of giving them access to the pill. In anticipation of that, states that were seeking to outlaw procedural abortions, some of them preemptively declared abortion, the use of telemedicine technology, legitimate in every case except for in the use of abortion.
Mm.
So telemedicine was, you could have somebody see you and triage you and evaluate you and give you medicine and authorize you to get the medicine at a site remotely from where that healthcare provider is.
Right.
So that's if you're having a supervised abortion process. Now women are getting access to medications that can cause abortion through internet searches. There uh, are setups where people can get medications by mail,
Mm-hmm.
and so now they're even trying to attack how to criminalize women who are self-managing abortions, simply because the need is to control a woman's reproduction. Absolutely. So that means even if you stop me as a trained medical provider from doing it, you're also going to stop women from accessing the medicines where they could safely manage it themselves. So
Mm.
telemedicine was the effort to overcome the barriers that prevented women from having access to healthcare providers in person, but still having the oversight and the information to safely negotiate the process if they live remotely.
Wow. Um, I've heard about people stockpiling. What is the pill called? I keep calling it the abortion pill, but it has a name, right? No, is it letters?
So there are two regimens. The regimen that President Biden is talking about losing restrictions to is the RU-486 or mifepristone. That's
Right.
that's the major component of the pill, and the medical regimen is to follow mifepristone with a pill that's more readily available, which is called misoprostol.
Yes.
Uh, there, without the mifepristone, there's a very effective regimen using misoprostol alone. Misoprostol is a medicine that's commonly prescribed for ulcers. And so when they found that as a side effect, it causes smooth muscle contraction. It became also very effective as a medicine that can effectively cause abortion.
Mm.
That effectiveness is less than if you take mifepristone or RU46 first.
Okay.
So the barriers were related to when RU46 came to the U.S. in 2000. Uh, there was a very strict process that was heavily regulated and regimented to restrict the use of it to people who agreed to have a specific license to provide it.
Mm-hmm.
So what President Biden is talking about is removing those FDA restrictions
Right.
that require a specific license to have that medicine, so that anybody can provide it, and it would democratize access to it.
And you were saying that women, the majority of women who have abortions are under 12 weeks. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
Before
so,
there's any possibility of viability at all.
okay, thank you. That was going to be my next question. Talk to me about women who have abortions between 15 and 20 weeks. What's typically going on with those women, and with well, typically going on with them, then tell me what that process is like.
So 15 to 20 weeks still second trimester.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, People talk about months. Clinically, we talk about weeks of gestation. So technically, the first trimester is the first 14 weeks of pregnancy.
Right.
But the second trimester would be 15 to up to actually 23 weeks.
Okay.
And so in the first 14 weeks, of the procedures largely can be an aspiration process where a specialized suction cannula to remove the contents of the uterus.
Mm-hmm.
After that, when there's a fetus present at 9 weeks, and the fetus just gets larger and larger over time.
Yeah.
And so from 15 to 20 weeks, it's got human recognizable parts, but the parts that are critical to life outside the womb aren't developed.
Okay.
So at 20 weeks, the question I hear you asking is, if the majority of pregnancies are ended in the first 12 weeks or
Mm-hmm.
in the first trimester, what makes a person wait till the second trimester?
Yeah.
And the story is like the movie title, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And by that I mean most people who decide to have an abortion don't have a single compelling reason. Our research lets us know that when a person has an abortion, they have several things that are at play. Many people don't know that they're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Many people have health issues that make that a very real possibility. Many people are in complex relationships. They might be in abusive relationships. They might be in relationships where the pregnancy was unplanned but was wanted. Then the relationship deteriorates, and the person carrying the pregnancy has to decide whether or not they want to be a single parent. Many pregnancies that are later, a component of many later pregnancies, especially for ones that are desired. Once the diagnosis of a pregnancy is established and it's developing along normally, at about 15 weeks, when you can begin to tell the sex or the other developmental structures are present, you can get a catastrophic diagnosis of some vital organ or functional part being absent that will be incompatible with life outside the uterus.
Right.
So usually the later ones have uh, a secondary story, but also to not stigmatize, there's the decision making around abortion is thoughtful and contemplative.
Mm-hmm.
Contrary to popular belief, women think deeply about their pregnancies, and so maybe uh, in at 12 weeks they were still kind of warm to the idea, but as they thought more deeply about it,
Mm.
this wasn't the right time. So we need to create space for all of those scenarios to play out.
Yeah.
But the whole notion that somebody's being irresponsible and apathetic by waiting to later, which is what most people think,
Mm-hmm.
is offset by the reality that the complexity of decision making uh, combined with the reality that some things that are catastrophic for later in the pregnancy have to alter your thinking about what you want to do with this pregnancy.
Right. Thank you so much for explaining that. I know some of that, but I didn't know all of it. And you hear that people are using abortions as birth control. Um, I don't know anybody that has ever used an abortion that way personally.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to hear you talk about your experience with it, and I really appreciate it.
Now,
Um,
let me set the world
yeah,
on fire for a minute by saying that if abortion is not birth control, what is it? Right? I
right,
know, and what I'm pushing back on the notion
right,
is that
yes,
we put moral weight on yeah, people prevent what they can, but
mm-hmm,
when you can't prevent, what do you do? Right?
yeah,
So what we have to do is we have to honor and respect that people have to make the same decision each time based on the facts of that pregnancy. So you can be in you can see a woman who had three abortions and the circumstances under which she had them was different each time. And it
yes,
doesn't simply constitute that she's apathetic and figure out, well, oh, well, it doesn't matter. If I get pregnant, I can have an abortion.
mm,
So we have to give women the moral, intellectual, and social space to be the complex individuals that they are.
thank you so much for that. I think I told you that my very liberal 22-year-old son walked in to the where I was watching TV on the morning that the Roe versus Wade decision came down, asked me what was wrong because he could see that I was visibly upset. I told him what happened. He goes, "Oh, I know." And then with kind of a shrug, he said, "But it's still available in lots of other states." Right? So the messaging he got from this was that, yeah, it's banned in some states, but it'll be available everywhere else. So it's kind of a so what. That's what he had heard, you know.
Hmm.
I'm imagining that more than just him more
Hmm.
heard it that way. Uh, the ban won't stop abortions from taking place even in the states where it's illegal. We all know that. You talked about that when you took us back to pre 73 and what illegal abortions look like with the coat hanger. I don't know what kind of technology will be used now. It might still be coat hangers. The dangers that women will face trying to get these clandestine abortions. So, what what do people need to know about what it's going to take for women who live in these banned states to now get an abortion? What do they need to know about that?
They need to know that uh, when I practiced in Mississippi, women in the Mississippi Delta couldn't get to Jackson, which is just 2 to 3 hours away. So if you're struggling to get to an abortion site because there was only one clinic, if what the reality is, many people have the challenges logistically, economically, and otherwise that say that if you can't get to Jackson from the Mississippi Delta, you certainly aren't going to be able to get to Illinois,
Right.
right? So the idea of women just being able to travel, if there was ever an undue burden, which the Casey standard said that you know you can restrict abortion, but you can't create an undue burden.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there's ever an undue burden, it's the fact that the women in the 50 states in this country can only access it in 13 or 14 states. So what it's going to mean is uh, the the there somebody says in theory there's no difference between theory and practice. In practice there is. So in
Mm-hmm.
theory, women will just be able to travel to these other sanctuary states, but
Right.
in practice they won't. And so in some ways, we're already post Roe in terms of limited access to
Mm.
abortion, even before Roe was overturned. That's now going to be more pronounced and more profound. And it's also going to visit the misery on more than just poor women and women of color. Because now, I had an ex girlfriend who once told me that if you have money and you have a problem and it can be solved with money, it's not a problem.
Mm.
uh, if now, if there are no abortion providers, then I don't care how much money you have, you still have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal is to
Mm.
to imperil abortion, right? And they're thinking that women would be afraid enough not to have an abortion if it becomes unsafe. but one of my mentors said there's not a law, as you said earlier, there's not been a law passed or any other kind of barrier that will prevent a woman from ending a pregnancy that she doesn't want to continue.
Right. Right. It's just not going to happen. So, my other question to you, which is a question that I asked you on Saturday as well, is what will you do now? What happens with you as a result of Friday's decision?
I will continue. I will. The assignment doesn't change,
The
and I
assignment doesn't
understand the
change.
assignment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The goal has been to get women to care and to safety and to respect their dignity, women and pregnant people. Um, how I do that might change. You know, I'm a law-abiding citizen as much as anybody else. I've registered my dissent. In a democracy, you register your dissent through legitimate means.
Mm.
And I'm registering my dissent through vehicles like you created for me, Laura, with this show
Mm.
and raising my voice to talk about the peril. Uh, I will I will do what I call harm reduction. I've not been, the law can't stop me from using my medical knowledge and expertise to to, to tell women what their options are, to tell them if they disclose that they're going to self manage, to tell them what medications are safe, what is the safe dose, what to watch for,
Mm-hmm.
to tell them where to go when they get in trouble. Um, and there will be an attempt to criminalize that, but I will do what I believe it to be the right thing to do.
Mm.
And like any good card player, I'm not going to show you what's in my hand,
Right.
but I will let you know that I am no less committed to assuring the safety, dignity, and well-being of women and pregnant people than I was last Friday.
Okay. Dr. Willie Parker. I love that. Thank you for that conviction. And so your book, Life's Work, so you and I found out that we're going to be imprint mates because
Yes,
my memoir comes out on Atria Simon and Schuster next year. Yours was released in 2017, is that correct?
correct.
And we are
Up for reprinting soon.
yes,
Yay.
that's what I was just going to say. We're looking for that reprinting, which would be very timely right now. Because it is an amazing, excellent book. It's so well written. Oh my goodness. And it really takes you through in such a relatable way what you see the world through your eyes. Like you literally take us through what it's like for you to walk into work and who you see and what it was like for you to be in those black churches where people were shamed. And it's just I love it, and I'm glad that it's going to be available hopefully soon for other people to read. Um, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to say, that you want to talk about?
I will just say when I signed my book, when I enjoyed meeting people and representing their interests. I was a confessionary for women who had unsafe, illegal abortions, and they never had a chance to tell anybody. They would come to my book signing and
Mm,
they would hold my hands, and I would accept their gratitude for the doctors who took care of them. But they also, it was for them, it was liberating to be able to say I had an abortion.
mm-hmm.
Uh, so when I would sign my book, that my tagline, or at least my compelling message, was always women matter, and we
Yeah.
should treat them like they do. And so, in this moment, I say, despite what we're doing to them, women and pregnant people matter, and I'm going to keep acting like they do.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is
My pleasure.
this is exactly the conversation I was hoping to have with you, and I'm still pinching myself that we got to do it as quickly as we did because I feel like it's so important to get your words out to our listeners as soon as possible. So thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you. The universe conspires with good people to make good things happen. So I'm just glad I was available.
It did.
And this, for me, it was an excellent use as a compensation for, in my mindfulness of thinking about that woman whose face I still see, who today I should have been doing her abortion.
Mm,
I can't do her abortion, but I can speak up on her behalf. And that woman will probably remain pregnant and have a baby that she never wanted to have.
mm. We're going to leave
We
it
should
right
never
there.
forget
Yeah,
that all of this, there's always a person attached to this. And sometimes I think
right.
we lose sight of that. And I'm going to do all that I can to make sure that people never lose sight of the fact that this is a political decision, But the reality is that many people's lives have been and will be affected.
Right.
I'm Dr. Willie Parker, and I'm the only Black Christian abortion doctor who insists that women matter, and I demand that we treat them like they do.